What is going on, y'all? It's been a minute. I just want to make a quick video today about kind of the best bang for buck motor that's out there for 240 or an S chassis for the most part. Mind you, I've been in the 240 game for multiple years now. No, there's tons of people that have been doing it way longer than me, but throughout the years, I've got to experience a bunch of different motors, a bunch of different chassis, and I really do love the kind of the S chassis platform, but everything is so expensive for it nowadays. This is my current 240SX, and I did engine swap it before. This used to have a notch top SR20 in it. Now, of course, I went with something different. But before, I was the biggest. I didn't even second think about this motor, but I was kind of ignorant about it. But let me tell you a little bit about this. And the engine is actually a VQ35DE. It's actually got my DoorDash order here. Okay, why? What? So there's multiple reasons why I think this is so great. For one, space. There's a ton of space here. It fits. As you can see, there's already exhaust manifold, there's mounts, I have power steering, I have all the amenities. You could even hook up AC. Mine is a little bit of a mess right now, mind you. I forgot what I was doing, so I took some brackets out, and I was just putting everything back together. Oh, that was battery tied down. Just to get it drift compliant, I was doing battery tie and a couple other things, and I just left half of the other things disconnected and all this fun stuff, so it's a little bit in shambles right now. But we have power steering here, and obviously you still have all your stock 240 stuff, and I do have the bracket for that. That just looks ugly, and I was just talking about that bracket, and I don't even have it on right now. Obviously, stock reservoir, you could use you know, just a regular 240 radiator fan, fans, 240 gauge, and the inside isn't all compromised. My inside still looks like a regular 240, doesn't look like it has a bunch of gauges sticking out, all that fun stuff. And all things considered, for a 240, it is not that expensive. But let me show you. So I try to have somewhat of a breakdown on what I spent items and what it kind of takes to do the swap, and a lot of the things are pretty basic. And realistically, the engine discussion for S chassis have been going on forever, just because there's so many engines that people put in these things. It's borderline close to a Honda Civic. On how many, if anything, this chassis is probably one of the ones that most get different engines from everything put into it. When Hellcats came out in like 2015, 2016 era, one of my dream swaps, because I was still obsessed with 240s, was actually putting a Hellcat engine in one. I would have thought that'd be sick. I don't think anyone's done that yet, which I think that'd be pretty gangster, but that's a lot of money. So let me show you a little bit about this breakdown and kind of explain to you everything that I did on my process. So I actually went about this buying a project car, and I wanted to film some of that, and I did film some of it, but I never made a real video on it. But maybe I'll include some of the clips here in this video or at the end. But anyways, I went to Portland, which is about 3 hours away from me. I bought an actual 2004 G35 with Brembos. It had a blown engine, mind you. What kind of comes in handy about having an entire chassis, you have all the wiring harnesses, the ECUs, and all the little knick-knack pieces that you need to actually make a swap worth it. Ended up finding another engine for $600, which you could probably find them cheaper, but that's just kind of what I found next day, so I just bought that right away. And then I will probably try to make sense of everything that I have. So all in total, this is probably going to depend on you. Fuel, this is kind of what I spent in fuel in my diesel truck to go pick up that engine, and as well with the car I already have, the trailer, so I'm not really including that in there. But you run a CD transmission, which is a really good transmission. It just bolts on. You don't have to buy an adapter, you don't have to buy none of that. It just actually goes on the transmission. It's simple. You buy just a regular clutch for a 350Z if you ever needed to. I already had the clutch, so I didn't have to buy that. Of course, I got it with the project car. One of the perks of buying it with the project car, I actually had a new clutch, which is kind of cool. And obviously, the other thing you need are engine mounts to actually bolt on to the chassis, just because, of course, this engine didn't come in a 240, which ISR makes absolutely everything for it. So all the R&D is already done. It's worth the price. So as far as the engine mounts, drive shaft and exhaust manifolds, all that stuff is already figured out, and you could do this a whole lot cheaper. But mind you, I was making a street car and I actually drive my car on the streets and want to enjoy it, so I did spend a little bit extra just because I did want to keep this kind of on the street a whole lot longer. And not to mention, it saves you a bunch of labor hours just welding stuff, and often labor is what ends up project cars being abandoned. So the ISR mounts for transmission and engine were $369. They're poly. So they're not, I think they're poly, but they're not hard or anything like that, so they're not vibrating. There's cheaper ones out on the market. This is kind of the best that I wanted for a street car. Get some quality ones. Drive shaft, there's already one off of Juku for $400, so it's right about what a custom drive shaft costs, so it's just easiest to just order it through them and just forget about it. The wide pipe you need, obviously now you have exhaust coming from two sides of the engine, so you need a wide pipe to mate it to the, oh Lord, to the single engine. So that's already figured out, so I did that, and then this is kind of where I balled out, or especially with the wide pipe. A lot of people will get, if you have a parts car, you could get this, and then if you have a welder, you could make a lot of stuff happen. But realistically, street car, I want this thing to be legit. So I did buy the S chassis, VQ to S chassis specific headers, which these were $567, and the wide pipe was $269, which that's kind of pretty, you're spending a little bit extra, but in my opinion, it's kind of worth the money. And then power steering is pretty compatible. It already has a power steering pump on the actual VQ. You just need to buy the little adapter lines. I already had a reservoir, so I actually just bought, I believe, a nitrous line for the high pressure line, and I just had regular AN lines, and then I just bought the little fittings that go onto the power steering. I spent $109. You can make the stock one out of the G35 work, but you just have a bunch of bent lines, and essentially you could do this for free, but I just kind of wanted it to be a whole lot nicer AN and kind of last forever, which I believe these will last forever too. Just, it is already all stock too. It's pretty cool. This is where I kind of went backwards. You could do this a whole lot cheaper too, or a whole lot different. You could go a couple different ways. But you have to get the ECU out of the G35 NATSI, which is just security. I found out after the fact you could just buy a program or a cable, or find someone with a cable. If you find someone with the cable, it's about like $100 to $200 to actually get the security removed off of the ECU so you could start your vehicle. Or you just order a, I ended up going with the Wiring Specialty harness. I had sent out my harness to get modified. If you go on the VQ pages, there's people that sell the ECU and VQ harness for like $800. So that's kind of way cheaper to do it that way. That way you wouldn't even have to do it for the parts car. I guess you could sell that if you really wanted to. Of course, that's kind of a lot of money if you're just looking at all that. But this is kind of where I make my money back and make the swap justifiable. So the rear bumper I sold for $500. I found $7 worth of money inside, which is pretty funny. The front fenders for the G I sold for $100. The seats were pretty meh. I sold them for $400. I sold a wheel liner for $20. I sold a front bumper for $100. Core support for $100. Headlights for $75. And then I ended up selling the shell for $1,800. Someone wanted a shell for the G, and I told them they were wanting to spend $2,000, and I told them I'd keep the differential on axles. Oh, there's another thing I kept. I got a lot of really good parts, especially these are all parts that people upgrade on their 240s, so you're getting so much stronger parts with these. But I told them I was going to keep the differential on axles when they came to look at it, so I actually let them know, like, I'd cut $200 off the price. I didn't even ask that. It was just kind of a me thing. They had a crash car, so I think they were just swapping everything over, so it kind of worked out for them. So they already had everything, just swapping everything over. But realistically, bang for buck, I ended up spending right almost at $3 grand. That's with doing the nicer parts, which realistically, if you look at any other engine swap, it's super expensive. I actually have a parts car right now that I just parted out. I'm selling the KA swap for like $2,000 on the dot for everything, which that's probably the cheapest. But a VQ is sub 300 horsepower. It's reliable. It's newer. You can still buy parts for it. It's not taxed. You could find an engine at a local junkyard just because it came in so many G35s or 350Zs. It's super convenient. You don't have to buy another oil pan. You don't have to buy a Link ECU or anything aftermarket. It's relatively pretty cheap for the price. If you have the resources, I'd highly recommend it. It's not going to be the easiest swap. The way I did it, it is a little bit easier. I had some complications with the wiring harness that I had, but you will have complications with anything. But realistically, if you really break down absolutely every swap that people do, they're spending from like 9 to 10 grand on a swap for a decent engine. So what's blows my mind, a case swap for a vehicle, if you really break it down, once you start doing the oil pan, the relocations, the front timing covers, the wiring harness, the ECUs, people are on the cheaper side, 9 to 10 grand for a case swap, which is crazy. Mind you, that vehicle only makes 150 sub or 200 horsepower. I'm not entirely sure of the exact numbers. I know there's a couple different variations, but same thing with the JZ. A JZ, I think, is probably the most superior swap, but it ruins an S chassis in the fact where you have so much more front end weight to where a VQ is actually, I believe, the same weight as a KA because it's aluminum. And it's 6 cylinders, and you still have that good like S chassis 50-50 close-ish weight distribution, and with a way better transmission that you don't have to buy a $2,000 adapter plate and then another $700 clutch. This is truly the cheapest way to get an S chassis running. There's so many people that give up on their projects and end up selling a shell on their own just because they don't have enough money, they run out, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources. This is so cheap that it's easy. With my SR, I had so much fabrication, or not fabrication, but with you have so much more components to be taken care of, stuff like the intercooler, turbos. I don't have any of that. I have all naturally aspirated power for sub 300 horsepower. That's pretty good. That's enough to make most people happy to go around the track or go around town, run some errands. It's pretty cool. And the only thing that people complain about is the noise, which I have a pretty good exhaust in my car. It's an HKS exhaust, and it sounds somewhat decent. It doesn't sound the best. It's not a JZ sound by any means, but it's decent. Oh, Lord. It's funny because I have an LS in my 350Z, but which that's normally supposed to have a VQ, and I don't know, but even doing an LS in my 350Z is pretty expensive, and I don't think I would have personally done it if I didn't already have gotten the car swapped. And I don't know if I've ever even showed my LS. Oh yes, I have. I made a couple videos of it. But I think my LS 350Z is pretty cool, but it takes so much money even to do it in that car. It's crazy. And if you're like me, I don't really like spending a whole lot of time working on my cars. I just want to go after you're off work, long day, you don't want to go home and work on a car. That's the last thing that I want to do. I just want to enjoy my cars, and that's kind of what's allowing me to enjoy my car a little bit more, is just keep it simple. There's no need to reinvent the wheel or to try to figure out this crazy swap, which you can. Realistically, if no one does it, then there wouldn't be anything cool, right? But it's a simple way to keep it simple, cheap, affordable. Nowadays, I don't know if much people have, $10,000 to spend on an engine swap to drive their vehicle 1 or 2 times a year. It's just not feasible. I drive my car to work. Mind you, I have quite a bit of cars, but I try to drive it to work as much as I can.